Hey everybody, happy Labor Day and welcome to another edition of Sports Speak, our 25th show. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Recording this late on a Sunday night after an action-packed weekend of sports. We're going to dive into everything that happened. First thing I want to talk about is we did some predictions. We did true or false, and we were both kind of wrong on a couple of things. Hockey, both the Islanders and the Golden Knights won their respective Game 7s and moved on. Vegas had a fun game today with Dallas. The Islanders kick off their series with the Tampa Bay Lightning coming up on Monday night. Also in the NBA, the Bucks, they were able to stave off elimination today, and that's where I want to start things off. But it didn't come easy and came at a cost as Giannis Antetokounmpo left with an ankle sprain, and there's a little uncertainty as to whether or not he'll play Tuesday night in Game 5. You'd imagine he'll be out there and try to be out there, but he looked to be in a lot of discomfort, and the Bucks were able to hang on. Chris Middleton was really clutch at the end, hit a big three-pointer in regulation and in overtime, and led the way in scoring for them to at least stay alive. But Milwaukee, Tim, is just – they're really being outperformed by a Heat team that we did not see going this far into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I thought the Bucks were going to come out and they were just going to destroy the Heat this series after starting down 1-0. But it hasn't worked out that way. Give the Bucks a lot of credit, at least today, surviving. But let's be honest. I'm going to tell you what. If Giannis gets ruled out going into this next game, that's probably it for Milwaukee. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it was 11 minutes for him today.
Yes.
With everything all said and done. And listen, for Giannis, you've got to be careful. You have to remember the Kevin Durant situation. Coming back too early or risking an injury in general. And I know Kevin Durant's obviously was more of an Achilles situation, but the same applies to all injuries. If you try to come back too soon, you're risking injury and you're risking harm. And realistically, I understand he won Defensive Player of the Year and MVP this year, but you've got to make a career decision. I know he wants to win an NBA championship. Odds are against him right now, but there's a lot more basketball left to play. I'm not saying that he shouldn't play next game, but overall, if he's hurting and it's a risk, he's 60%, 70%, don't do it. If he's 95%, okay, you can make the argument, but he's got to be ready to play, and he's got to be ready to play 30-plus minutes on the floor to even give the Bucks a chance. But if he's not playing next game, I think the Bucks are done. The Heat move on to the Eastern Conference Finals.
And how about that? That would be the fourth time Mike Budenholzer has taken a good team into the playoffs that was a top 2 seed, twice with Atlanta, twice with Milwaukee, and not get any further than the conference finals. And he's only gotten there once. Really frustrating for Milwaukee with all the promise they've shown. But what about the Heat? Bam Adebayo in near triple-double today. Tim, he's really become he was in the All-Star game this year, but he's becoming one of the elite big men in the game.
Yeah, and Adebayo, let me tell you what, has really been a big step up from Hassan Whiteside, which when you really think about Whiteside, everyone thought he was the future for the Miami Heat. But I'll tell you what, this Heat team, you have to really think about it. Okay, Jimmy Butler, huge acquisition for this team. And we know, by the way, how much Jimmy Butler wants to win an NBA championship, especially after that failed run with Philadelphia. But, you look through the roster, too. I mean, for example, Dragic, he's still on that roster, and he's always been a key role player. And you have to remember, too, with him being an all-star, I believe, 2 consecutive times, if I'm not mistaken, it's hard to think about that. He's been in the league for a very long time. And for him, his time's running out, too, in regards to get a title. And right now, this is a huge opportunity. And, when I look at it, Eddie, if I'm being utterly honest, I'm not saying the Heat win an NBA championship, but when you think about how hot they've come since, especially coming in the bubble, things have timed right for them. And it kind of reminds me about how Toronto started off last year I know they had Kawhi, but no one expected them, especially this year, to be that effective. And I think it would be really fitting if we saw an Eastern Conference Finals with the Miami Heat and the Toronto Raptors both facing off each other, 2 teams that had zero expectations, especially after Toronto lost Kawhi Leonard. No one expected them to be competing for an NBA title, let alone making the finals again this year.
Yeah, sure. And, we're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals, but also in the broad scope. Everybody always says, oh, the West is just so much better than the East. But the Lakers and Clippers, I mean, foreseeably, one of those two teams will be in the NBA Finals. They've both, they've had a rocky road of it so far in the playoffs. They've gotten some challenges. It has been from some good teams like Portland and Dallas. And right now, the Lakers having a bit of trouble with the Rockets after dropping game one and having a tough game in game two. But regardless, the East, they're not like so far behind the West. There's still the opportunity for them to put up a good fight and fight for the title. And I can see any of those four teams putting up a good battle and maybe defeating one of those LA teams. But I'm going to move here into our SEC weekend recap. I'm going to start with my surprise, which is another prediction we both got wrong, and I think you'll be similar in this, that Tiz the Law actually did not win the Kentucky Derby. He was close, but a big run by Authentic at the end. That team, he is owned by Bob Baffert, who, for the people who know about horse racing, that is like the pinnacle owner of horse racing, and he has won so many Triple Crown races over the past couple decades. But his team had some heartaches. One of their jockeys was injured. One of their horses had to drop out, but Authentic, who was, I think, the third favorite, was able to get the win and beat Tiz the Law. And, for like you said the other day, I mean, for Tiz the Law, it's frustrating for that whole group, but you'd rather lose it in the second race than lose it in the third. And he's going to come back strong, and they're going to try to turn things around at the Preakness next month. But that's my surprise. My expectation is that the Mets actually are starting to figure things out. I had said from the beginning, I thought they were going to get a playoff spot. I don't know if that's going to happen for sure, but I think they're going to come pretty darn close. And today was the best this team's looked all season. Jacob deGrom, of course, was dominant on the mound. 12 strikeouts, 3 hits, 1 run, 7 innings, and really silenced a Phillies lineup that had been potent the last few weeks and had been 9-2 over their last 11 games coming in. But he got the run support he finally deserved. His defense was solid, but Pete Alonso, 2 home runs. He's now got 10 on the season. Jeff McNeil hit his first home run, had 3 hits on the day. And 2 guys who have really come on the scene for the Mets that have proven to be part of their future. Dominic Smith and Andres Jimenez were so strong. Dom Smith was kind of phasing out because we knew Alonso was going to be the better first baseman. And they stuck him in left field. Last year, he was terrible. This year, he's been solid in the outfield. He lost some weight, and his hitting is so much better now. He's leading the team in RBIs. He's second in home runs. And then Jimenez has come up, was a highly touted prospect, and it's beaten out Ahmed Rosario for the shortstop job. Has the most speed this team has seen since Jose Reyes. Drove in a couple of runs. He drove in 6 runs over the 3 games in this series, 2 a day. Like, really, really impressive from the young rookie. So, as I expected, the Mets have turned things around after that horrible stretch last week with the games against the Yankees and Miami. But I still think they have a chance, especially with this expanded postseason. And then my conclusion comes from the tennis world. We talked about this a little off air. You didn't see this, but today, Novak Djokovic, who's the only one of the big 4, Djokovic, Murray, Nadal, and Federer, who's actually at the U.S. Open, came in as the favorite to win easily, gets defaulted, which basically means disqualified, loses all his prize money and the points he's earned for his ranking in the ATP because he accidentally hit one of the lineswomen with a ball. He sent it back. They were not looking, and he hit her like near the throat area. She seemed to be okay, but because of an unsafe procedure or whatever, they defaulted him and basically kicked him out of the rest of the tournament. So my conclusion, though, because there are so many people who are so upset with him, that Novak Djokovic is really fighting a losing battle when it comes to the tennis fan base. Because you think of Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. They are so much more well-liked. Federer has become an American icon, even though he's coming from Switzerland. And then Nadal is just loved across Europe. Novak Djokovic has not gained that same love. And this is the third thing already this year where people have not been happy with him. You remember back in April when he was training secretly at a place that was supposed to be closed in Spain, and then he ended up contracting coronavirus. Then a few weeks ago, he kind of went over the head of Federer and Nadal and Murray and started working with a couple other players, including Alexander Zverev, to start a new tennis players union and didn't really consult them. And now this. So he's really going to be fighting a losing battle with the fan base. And, guys who are so dominant in their sport always have a lot of haters. But Novak Djokovic, I feel like, is really exceeding all that. So that's my SEC recap for the weekend.
Yeah, Djokovic, for a fact, really has had a lot of haters, especially late. And you do really hope that side turns for him because, I mean, when you think about it, too, and you mentioned, obviously, in terms of Roger Federer and how he's an American icon, I think about of all the great matches Djokovic has had. I mean, there's so many, matches where it's he just has his stuff and you can just tell almost how on the women's side when Serena Williams was dominant, you knew Djokovic was there, and if his serves are on point, he's going to turn around and he's just going to blow it right by you before you can even get a return. And you think about of all his long matches too. I mean, there's many times where he's had great matches, especially with Nadal over the years. And I'm really excited for Djokovic, at least in terms of what happens from this point on. I'm upset that obviously for him, he isn't turning out well because he's had a bad strut over really the last 4 months. But it'll all turn around for a good eye eventually for him. He's a great individual outside the tennis court. And listen, some people make mistakes, things happen, but you also have to remember too, tennis players in particular, you're almost like your own independent business. It's not a safety, it's not a contract. You come here and, you try to play professional tennis, you have to stay in your prime and you want to make sure that you have everyone involved. So I understand the players union thing to an extent. I understand whose back he went behind, but at the end of the day, this is your career and he's trying to make everything out of it. But I'm going to start with my surprise and I'm going to go with the New York Islanders. I'm going to tell you something. I really thought, and I said it on the last podcast, I thought that the Islanders yet again would find a way to lose another playoff game in an Islander fashion. And instead they turn around and they won 4-0. I'll tell you what, they played one heck of a Game 7. They showed why they are a dominant team, a favorite to win the Stanley Cup, might I mind you. And I'm really, really excited to see how this momentum continues for the Islanders. Now, my expectation, you mentioned the Mets, I mentioned the Yankees yet again. Let me tell you something. I'm losing my mind, Eddie. I am losing my mind. I really can't expect anything better than losing to the Baltimore Orioles after we beat them 19, I think it is, consecutive games. We lost for them for the first time in a year and a half. And they go on a 3-game winning streak, essentially, against us mentally. I believe they only won 2. But mentally, they're on a 3-game winning streak because they've turned around and they've dominated us. And all of a sudden, the Yankees were right there for the second spot in the division. And now we're battling for a wild card because Toronto has surpassed us. And don't close your eyes because Baltimore's right there. I'm losing my mind. I cannot handle it. The pitching staff has been struggling. And I mean, literally, I went on a rant today. Gary Sanchez is terrible. Aaron Hicks shouldn't even be a Yankee at this point with how inconsistent he is. You turn around to Tyler Wade really needs to get DFA'd as soon as possible. And there's so many other issues this Yankees roster has that this team may go above 500, but they may not even make the playoffs because let me tell you something. If there's no healthy Aaron Judge, no healthy Giancarlo Stanton, or at this point, no unbroken Garrett Cole, who doesn't allow 3 home runs a game, the Yankees aren't going to win many more major ball games in dominant fashion for the rest of this season. Now, moving on to my conclusion, I'm going to go to the NASCAR end. Obviously, I didn't get to see the race tonight because I was racing the East Park series. But expectation, Austin Dillon. I said on the last podcast as well. Austin Dillon, not a surprise overall that he's turned around and he's had a very solid start to the chase, getting a second-place result. And obviously, Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, they've had one thing, but NASCAR playoffs in general, in terms of my conclusion, you're going to see drivers in holes already. Guess what? Let the racing begin. Whoever has a bad week next week, maybe yet again, you're going to see some very exciting racing over these next 2 races. And it is really shaping up to be a good start of the chase because I'll tell you what, at times, especially Austin Dillon, he found himself a lap down, turned around, and all of a sudden got a second place result. Guys mixed it up, shook it up, and what it came down to was the end finish. Even Jimmy Johnson looked like he had a good day, and I know he wasn't in the chase, but we saw some guys that weren't in the chase have pretty good solid days. What is it going to be like next week? How many cars, especially, crash out next week? That's going to be interesting because I know, for example, Keselowski had a tough day today. We know the Martin Truex Jr. and Chase Elliott situation, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Mhm.
But overall, it is going to get crazy, Eddie, over the next few weeks.
2 short tracks also with Richmond and Bristol. So, and already we see some drama with Elliott and Truex. We'll get to that in a few minutes. There's 2 things I want to talk about before that. I'm gonna kind of spin off your Yankees thing because they're the 2 teams that everybody thought were just gonna blow everybody away in the American League are the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros. Well, the Astros just got swept in 4 games by the Angels, who are terrible, and now Jose Altuve is on the injured list. Springer can't hit now that he doesn't know what's coming to him. Like the Astros, no Yordan Alvarez, of course, no more Cole. So and Verlander's out. So their pitching staff, Brandon Bijelak from my town of Metuchen, New Jersey, is not going to carry this pitching rotation too far. So they're in a serious hole. And the Yankees, Garrett Cole, he's a really good pitcher. I was saying it from the beginning. I still think Jacob deGrom is the better pitcher because Garrett Cole has the tendency to give up home runs. And it's not just at Yankee Stadium either. It's also at some bigger ballparks. I know they're playing against the Orioles right now. It's a little different, but regardless, he can't be giving up so many home runs. And that's really what's hurt him. It's what hurt him all the way back on opening night against the Nationals. He still got the win because Stanton and Judge were there. But guess what? That's not the case now. And for the Yankees, you really have to assess things for the future. Whatever happens in this 60-game season happens. And, there's going to be surprises. If the Detroit Tigers somehow beat out the Yankees and Astros for the last playoff spot, you know what? It's 2020. Anything can happen. But Brian Cashman really has to start thinking about things because this is 3 years in a row where the Yankees have been depleted by injuries. Giancarlo Stanton comes here and cannot stay healthy. Aaron Judge, we know how good of a player Judge is. He's top 5 in the majors, probably, I'd argue. But he gets hurt so often that you just get him in small spurts. And what do you really have in Aaron Boone as a manager? Can Gary Sanchez hit consistently? We know he can hit for power, but he goes through these dips where all he can hit is a home run or else he's striking out. And the one saving grace they always had was that farm system. But guess what? The more trades they've made over the past couple of years, their farm system for the first time since 2015, I think it is not ranked top 10 in the major leagues. Other than Clint Frazier, who just bounces back and forth, and they still can't find a spot for him after 4 years in the organization. They don't have much else. Justice Sheffield is gone. There's been other guys like Tyler Wade who have come up and have not performed well in the majors. There have been those that have, like Mike Ford and Mike Tauchman, but still, there's some holes, and the Yankees really have to reassess things going forwards. But I want to talk briefly. We did see a little college football this weekend as well. A few, games. They were FBS games, but small conferences. UAB was in action. Texas State. Labor Day night is BYU and Navy, 2 teams hanging right near the top 25. That's probably the big game of the week. But, my concern that I also heard that broke on Saturday was that Tennessee had 44 players taken out of practice in terms of contact tracing for COVID, which means a decent amount of those players have COVID and others were near them and have a good chance of getting it. So, Tim, I know they've been, hopeful about these power conferences, and we really can't see the SEC, backing out of this at this point. But do you think we could see some changes with some of these conferences with their plans? Because, other than Conference USA and the Sun Belt, all the other ones are still yet to start.
Yeah, and to be honest, the ones that didn't start yet overall, I feel like now, especially after that Tennessee situation, they're going to feel very confident with their decision. 44 players, essentially all testing positive, Maybe even all of them didn't, but you had to take them all out regardless. It's not good. It really just is not good. But it also goes back to this point too. And this is one thing that's really irritating me on the education standpoint, in particularly big universities. There's nothing these schools are doing. I should say there's nothing, but to an extent, there's not much doing of prevention to stopping parties on campus and all these other things. And it's really unfortunate because Tennessee is a party school. Alabama, they are a party school. I mean, it is a rolling party in Alabama every year, every single day. I look upstate, even here in New York, SUNY Oneonta, for example. They're a big party school, but they're not, a big football university, right? Mm-hmm. But they're telling their kids to go home and take a 2-week mandatory, sit at home simply because of the fact that those kids couldn't stop partying, and overall ended up giving massive amount of kids, in fact, over 200 kids, coronavirus. And sure, 44 is a little number, but how about the numbers that are inside the school? Because realism is if 44 Tennessee players caught COVID, I'm sure there's at least 200 plus more in Tennessee's university that caught coronavirus. Mm-hmm. So I'm very positive that that's a scenario. Now, I understand, hey, maybe one player caught it and spread it to an entire team. That is possible, too. But at the end of the day, you can't put blame on the players, obviously, because at the end of the day, yes, people need to live their lives. But as an organization, a school, and even as a player, you have to make a smart decision. And I understand these teams and schools want to make money, but sometimes things are a lot bigger than money. And it's going to really hurt when more teams start catching COVID in the next week and a half. I'm real excited to see a BYU and Navy game tomorrow. Obviously, Navy every year is always around top 25. And BYU has a little bit of hype coming into this year, not in terms of top 25 poll, but they have a little bit of hype in terms of they feel like they have a solid football team for the first time in a while. So I'm going to be really eager to see that. But when it's all said and done, I guess the question is, Eddie, how many weeks does this first portion of the season last? Because we know they wanted to try to push football to the spring. I feel like this is going to be NCAA's way of saying, okay, well, guess what? A couple more schools have COVID. We're going to end it. We'll try it again to continue off in the spring. I just feel like that's what's going to happen because this isn't going to stop anytime soon.
I know. It really feels like a ticking time bomb when you think about it. And I think that schools like in the Conference USA or maybe Navy, I think the military academies will be able to handle this pretty well. But you mentioned the quote-unquote party school. And Alabama University, in their first week of being reopened, they do not have many stringent policies in terms of, safety of the students or the staff. They had 460 positive cases on the campus during the first week. That is not setting a good precedent at all. And, a lot of the SEC schools are similar in that facet. They're all very big schools, and a lot of them have their students on campus right now. So you wonder what's going to happen. And no, I'm not going to direct everything just at the SEC because you think about other schools as well. Maybe in the Big 12. There's some big party schools also in the American Athletic Conference. They're starting their football season next week. You think about South Florida, Central Florida, Cincy. I think they're still going to happen. And we talked about this a few shows ago, that it's college kids. And if professional teams are having issues keeping track of, 30-year-old baseball players from acting out, thinking about the Marlins going out in Miami and contracting COVID in Atlanta, and then, but when you've got college kids, that's so much worse. And also college football. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also use this comparison too, and I've mentioned it twice, and I'll even mention it a third time in terms of the SEC standpoint. Nick Saban cut someone from his team when he coached in the NFL for going to his own father's funeral. Mm-hmm. You're not going to convince me, and again, this is no shot at Nick Saban, but you're not going to convince me that Nick Saban's going to stop wanting to play football just because coronavirus exists. So, and not saying Nick Saban's the lead of SEC, but that is the SEC mentality. If I'm being utterly honest, we play through everything and we play with heart. And that's the big reason why SEC football hasn't backed down. And the NCAA really, Eddie, in the big reality, is going to have to be forced to shut them down because they'll refuse to stop until they physically can't anymore. And that's the sad realism of it, because every scientific evidence we've had to this point was enough to shut down the other big conferences and say, all right, we're done. But it wasn't enough for the SEC, which arguably has the biggest viewership, has, the biggest money schools in the entirety of national football, or I should say, national football, but the NCAA. And guess what? They're still here because all they care about is money, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really sad thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have to see what happens. College football started this weekend with like 6 or 7 games in the FBS. It's going to continue to ramp up next week. I think Big 12 starts next week. Then it's ACC, SEC, and American Athletic all starting. But wrapping up with NASCAR, I know you were busy in your East Park race, but I'm just going to recap a couple things from tonight. The playoff drivers all ran pretty well. I think it was 12 of them finished in the top 16 in the race. So, they all ran consistently. There were, at one point, 15 of the drivers in the top 16 were playoff drivers late. But Matt DiBenedetto did not have a good race, kept going to the back. Overall, it was a bad night for Ford. Almirola was slow. Keselowski and Blaney both had issues in stage 1 they had to battle back from. Blaney is actually sitting below the cutoff right now. Clint Boyer did not have the best night. But, of course, the big drama, another big driver has made an enemy in Chase Elliott, and now Eric Jones is the last man standing at Joe Gibbs, who has not had a big-time incident with Chase Elliott. So 15 to go. Truex had dominated the race. Elliott had cycled to the lead because of a caution right around, the pit cycle, and Truex would have caught Elliott under the green flag conditions, but a caution comes out. I believe that was for John Hunter Nemechek. So they restart, and Truex starts catching Elliott, and with 11 to go, now I'm a Martin Truex Jr. fan, but I do question his decision here with 11 to go to completely send it on Chase Elliott. He would have passed him eventually, and they were going to catch lap traffic. He would have caught lap traffic in an 11-lap span and been able to make the pass cleanly. He was a little too aggressive, and it looked just like Tyler Reddick at Daytona last week. He was not clear, put them both into the wall. Truex actually got even worse damage. Elliott tried to stay out. They both finished towards the back and lost a lot of the cushion that they had because of playoff points, because, so many playoff drivers ran well in this race and finished ahead of them. Only DiBenedetto and Blaney finished behind them. So that was tough for them. And then Austin Dillon, credit to him. You mentioned him in your SEC. He gave a heck of a run, ran about 15th most of the race, slowly worked his way up, and almost passed Harvick off the final turn. Harvick won again. Hamlin was solid until he had a blunder trying to get to pit road, but he recovered for a solid finish. Harvick and Hamlin, still the 2 classes of the field. But Truex tonight won both stages, and 7 of the last 8 races he's finished 4th or better. That's why I'm still saying, I still think it's going to be him, Chase, Harvick, and Hamlin in the final 4, and you never know what can happen from there. But now that there's this drama, Tim, typically in the playoffs, the drama starts around the second round or around the Martinsville race. But this year, first race of the playoffs, and we've got 2 of the biggest drivers not too happy with each other. Truex did apologize. Chase wasn't happy at all, though, because they were going to finish 1-2. They were 5 seconds ahead of Kevin Harvick when that happened. But that now we're heading to 2 short tracks, and the tempers will be short. We've got guys below the cutoff like Matt DiBenedetto and Ryan Blaney who are good at short tracks and want to get back above. I don't know what's going to happen. And Richmond and Bristol late in the season have been chaotic in the past, and being in the postseason instead of the regular season will just completely compound that this year.
Yeah, Richmond is going to be, I guess you could say, a bump and run fest, just like how I guess you could say Bristol's going to be in regards to the intensity from, lap 1 to 400, or in terms of Bristol, lap 1 to 500. But, overall, I look at it like this. Truex, in my opinion, was more of a lapse of judgment, I guess you could say, in regards to he just thought when he made the send he was going to clear, and didn't work out. But I understand Chase Elliott's frustrations in general. This is now the 3rd time, really. He should have won a Darlington race and didn't. I'm not saying he would have held off Truex, but at least he was in position. And ultimately, he ends up getting wrecked as a result. Now, I'll tell you what, give him a big round of applause in regards to he still got a 20th place result. He beat Truex despite that incident. He beat DiBenedetto, and he also beat Ryan Blaney, whose day really kind of went from north to south after a loose lug nut, and then he was just never really able to rebound from that point. But what made this race so interesting, Eddie, if I'm being honest, was how mixed up the field was from start to finish. Throughout the day, and again, I mentioned Austin Dillon as an example earlier. He was a lap down at one point, trying to find his way back on, and once he got the car figured out, he was up there, working his way through the field. Another one, too, Brad Keselowski. He found himself 2 laps down at one point in this race after getting some damage, and he overall overcame and came all the way back for an 11th place result. Another one, too, if I'm not mistaken, that got damaged was Joey Logano today as well. And he himself, either way, battled that car. I believe it was to a top 10 result, maybe even a top 5 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Third. So, yeah, there we go. So, Logano overall did a great job of rebounding as well. But, listen, mistakes happen. The big thing for Chase Elliott and Martin Truex Jr. in particular is, unlike a DiBenedetto or a Blaney, they were really able to benefit off a couple more, stage wins and bonus points and all that. I mean, Blaney, don't get me wrong, won Talladega, but it's not like he's racked up stage win after stage win this year. And for them, yes, obviously there's going to be a lot of animosity between the two for the rest of the year. But as long as there's no more incidents, I think it will be fine. But guess what? If Chase turns around just like he did with Denny Hamlin a few years back, and he gives payback right back, it's going to go the entire chase long. One of these guys, I think, will advance, obviously, if that's the case. But it could be another Joey Logano situation with Matt Kenseth. I mean, you never know. But you never, in terms of NASCAR, ever want to mess with the fan favorite driver in the entirety of the sport.
Mm-hmm. And now 3 of arguably the top 5 drivers in NASCAR have had a conflict with Elliott this year. Of course, you remember that idiotic finish to the Food City 500 with Logano back in June when him and Chase just drove each other into the wall. And then, of course, the incident in Darlington back in May when Kyle Busch spun Chase Elliott right before the rains came. But overall, Chevrolet had a heck of a night. William Byron and Alex Bowman finishing 5th and 6th. Kurt Busch pulled off a really wise strategy in stage 1. Him and Bubba Wallace decided to stay out with the caution with about 20 laps left in the stage. Busch was able to hang on old tires for 5th place, get some stage points, and then stayed in the top 10 the rest of the night to get 8th. He's quietly been up there all season, and all the Chevys are in a good spot. Right now, the lowest 5 in points are all Fords: Almirola, Boyer, Custer, Dibby, and Blaney. We know a lot of those guys are really good at short tracks. That can change over in a heartbeat, especially with the chance of a big wreck at Bristol. But it's going to be fun to watch these next couple of weeks under the lights. And the drama is going to kick up. And I would not be surprised to see Chase Elliott try to get some payback on Truex. But we'll have to see what happens. Got a busy week in sports. College football kind of starting to ramp up. NFL also starting up. Thursday we'll be back. Preview things just before the Chiefs and Texans kick off the NFL season. Cannot wait for that. Until then, though, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Happy Labor Day. We'll see you next time here on Sports Speak.